Welcome into the official. We've got follow-up to show number 1 we did this week, where we are giving you high school updates for the 2025 freshman class. They are in their senior season right now, and we talked about quarterbacks. Now we're going to focus on running backs, receivers, tight ends, and athletes. I know it's a lot more position, but we're cutting some of the fat. We're going to get right to the players. And first up is Anthony Rogers. We've got is the game over for Anthony Rogers? Kind of a, I guess movable chess piece athlete, positionless player. David, are you concerned about his role? I guess he's going to Alabama. Is that right?
Yeah, he's committed to Alabama. Just has had a weird journey. He started out at Pike Road, and as a freshman, honestly, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, his rushing was more efficient than Quinshon Judkins, and Judkins was I think he was a senior or a junior or whatever, which is very strange. Then he went to IMG, didn't get many touches because IMG everyone kind of gets a little bit. You're not going to produce really well there. And then he transferred to Carver in Alabama, and he's basically a slot receiver. It looked like. I watched one full game now. They're giving the bulk of the carries to Trey Berry, who's not. He's being looked at by colleges. I believe he's only getting FCS offers, maybe some G5 in there, but he's just like a steady between the tackles. Nothing stands out too much. But so long story short, 17 carries in 6 games. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. It's like around 3 carries per game. Kylan Deere actually finally broke out this past week, had a really big game. He's going to be, I would imagine he'll be the grinder. And then Rodgers is just a guy. He has a pretty good athletic profile too. So, I mean, I know he's like 5'8", but
maybe Rodgers goes the Emmanuel Henderson route and, kind of turns into a receiver or something like that. So
yeah,
I think for fantasy, I'm not too interested.
Yeah.
All right, I'll pull up here on the screen. We've got fantasy points per game for running backs. Previous episode, we introduced this. This is our database of all high school stats. The players who qualify need to have a 24/7 composite, entry, and also at least 2 games of stats on Max Preps. And Matt scraped all this data for us. Pretty awesome. We get fantasy points per game, and you'll see Alvin Henderson. We've talked about him all year. 61 fantasy points per game for this dude, who is tracking on a Derrick Henry type trajectory for his senior season. Just absolutely bonkers numbers. But then we also have, Gideon Davidson doing pretty well up here for Clemson. Some other names that we've talked about quite a bit. I guess there's not that many other names, that we've really brought up too much. David, anyone jump out here for you that you've been able to look at and say, I need to look at this guy more, or anything like that?
Nate Shepard's pretty interesting. He's like 5'10", 190, but he's fast. His brother is Will Shepard at Colorado. Good athlete, and he's from Louisiana. Usually pretty good athletes come out of there. Gideon Davidson will probably get a bump in the athletic model once we get an update on that, because he's like a 5 sport guy, actually. So he'll probably get a bump. I think he's like RB3 on 3, so maybe they're a bit ahead of me on that. Super productive. And then, I don't know, like a lot of these guys are pretty interesting. None of them are like James Simon is like a super solid player. Like, he has good bloodlines. His dad was a running back at Louisiana Tech, had like 4,800 yards in college. Like, so he has like a sort of natural running style to him, but he's not like a freak athlete or anything. He's kind of, I don't know. It's just, when we talk about these guys, it's like, yeah, I think he's a good player. It's just, can he be the guy at Texas? Which, you know what I mean? It's just hard at some of these at these blue blood schools. So that's the only part I struggle with. Like, is he going to be the guy that can get the bulk? He's definitely, he has really good feel and all that stuff, but I don't think he's like a freak athlete, but pretty obviously good production there. So yeah, I don't know. Shane Marshall is kind of like he's probably one of the dogs of the class. Georgia was trying to flip him temporarily, but now they got Chroma, so they'll probably back off.
Yeah.
He's like a contact balance freak. So yeah, I don't know. Kingston's he's sneaky. He's such a BYU guy. He's not going to look good in the model. Like we just can't capture him really. But he's like his IG. If you look at real analytics, his IGA in-game athletic score is actually pretty solid, like 82, I think. That's like 30th in the class. He's just one of these guys that has good feel. He's like 200 pounds and he's agile. Like I said, the model probably won't like him, but he's more athletic than the model will say. So he's just a very classic BYU. I think his top speed is like
a classic BYU guy.
Yeah, like he's big. He's kind of like a worse Tyler Algier type, but or LJ Martin. They all kind of seem the same to me. Like their top speed's like 20.5 miles per hour, but they're talented runners and hard to tackle. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not gonna go through all of them, but
yeah, I mean, I think one thing that list shows me is, a lot of times the top prospects aren't necessarily the biggest producers, it's just an interesting thing that happens. I think it's, but these are not even guys who are playing in 8-man football or like teeny tiny high school towns. Like these are guys with composite ranks. Their 3 stars or better for the most part. I mean, they're known quantities and putting up crazy numbers. I think it's not bad to at least look and see who's ranked really low that's crushing it. Maybe they're a diamond in the rough. Maybe we need to look at that a little deeper. So I think it's very valuable because the guys we focus on actually sometimes don't put up the crazy stats, and maybe they're going to be great in college, but I think there's a disconnect there that we need to pay attention to. All right, moving on to wide receivers. We've got Derek Meadows continues his lack of production this year with 12 receptions in 6 games. I mean, I don't see how he's a 5-star receiver. Jamie French, who was just taken in our mock draft last week. David, what's the update with Jamie French, a guy that we think is very sound but not an athletic freak?
Yeah, so Tramel Jones was the quarterback at Mandarin to start the year, and then he got like an ACL injury, so they've had to switch it up, and I don't know, the offense just hasn't been as good, I guess, but he's currently being outproduced by a freshman, which is Bryson Wright, who is honestly, he might be really good though, so it's really hard to balance all these things because he's like 6'3", 200 as a freshman, and
wow.
I don't know. I don't know much about him yet. I got to watch some more of him, but right now he's got like almost like 2 more fantasy points per game than Jamie French. So it's just that freshman outproducing a senior, which is very odd to me.
I mean, there has to be a whale of an excuse for that because like that's pretty nuts. I don't know, unless Jamie French has some like injury he's playing through or something. Like that's 4 years difference. You can't let a 14-year-old or something outproduce you. That's insane.
Yeah, it's like I don't know. Sometimes I do get trapped by the production stuff, but
I think
it just seems weird.
That big of a chasm. I don't know. In terms of age, like if it's a junior, okay, whatever. I mean, a freshman, either the freshman is the next Jeremiah Smith, which is possible, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's a disparity in touchdowns, and it could be wrong because Max Prep sometimes is wrong. Like it says he has 1 receiving touchdown versus Bryson Wright. It says he has 6. I do know French had a kickoff return. Like he's still out there making plays though. He did have a kickoff return touchdown, I believe. They played like yesterday or something. They played
that's
Monday night for some reason, but
yeah, that's weird.
So I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there and letting you guys know that Jamie French isn't producing like we thought a senior would. It's kind of putting me off a bit.
All right, let's take a look here for the top producers in fantasy points per game. Again, for the receiving group, we got a guy going to Georgia who's actually producing fantasy points at the wide receiver position. That is unusual for them. So we'll see if he'll do that once he gets to school. One guy that's interesting to me is Javen Boggs. His max preps is strength of schedule is very, very good. He's producing a lot of stats. And going to UCF, I mean, I don't know if he'll wind up at UCF, but that seems to be a bit of a. He also, I think, does it in a lot of ways, right? Does he? Does he do some special teams or some defense as well? If I remember correctly, I mean, he's just like kind of a really interesting athlete out of the state of Florida that I'm keeping my eyes on for sure. Anybody else pop out for you here?
Yeah, Boggs is really producing. He was formerly committed to Ohio State, so he's like a refined type player. UCF, I don't know. Gus Malzahn receivers I don't know if they really do that great, but it seems a little bit run heavy. But regardless, let's see who else is on here. That's interesting. Obviously, we talked about Jerome Miles. I believe he's still out. I think he's still out with a knee injury, so you can see he's only played the 2 games. But Brooks is on there. Taylor. So a lot of these guys that we have talked about are producing like we expected. So that's good. I don't know if there's anyone that's like the Georgia thing. Like you see, Blackshear is putting up big numbers. I've noticed that team is like generally like much better than their competition. They seem to like recruit the area and get all like the best players at that school. So like maybe a little bit of grain of salt with his numbers, but I don't know, Georgia wide receivers in general, it's tough. Like all the guys they're bringing in are definitely pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Gentry's an interesting guy. You know, some of these names I haven't really looked at. They're 3 stars or below. But like Gentry going to Texas Tech, he's got a bunch of track stats, triple jump type guy with a decent strength of schedule. I think he's interesting. But yeah, some of these names, if nothing else, gets you, I think, looking at some names that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise looked for and filters out guys to cherry pick some 3 stars that you may want to look at a little closer. I mean, that's kind of how I take it, not as, gospel or anything like that. Okay. We'll move on towards kind of the end here. Quickly go through tight ends. The same thing. Vander Ploeg going crazy at the tight end position. With a really bad strength of schedule there, -10. Elias Williams is probably the one everyone talks about because he's going to Georgia and the number 1 tight end in the country. My guy's not even on here, I don't think. Lincoln Cure, which is sad. But yeah, I mean, tight ends, we haven't gone too deep into tight ends. Anybody you want to highlight, or we can move on to athlete?
Yeah, I don't think Lincoln Cure has stats on there. I know he already has at least.
Yeah, he may have max prep stats.
He had like a 200. I haven't seen much of him. I know he did have a game that he had over 200 yards receiving in a game. So he's still good. Surprised Elias Williams' strength of schedule is that low. But yeah, I don't know. He's clearly, it's between him and Cure probably for the top guy. And then, yeah, I think Ploeg I believe he's picked up an offer from Alabama like within like the last couple of months. So they obviously, I don't know if they look at, I don't know what these college recruiter, I don't know exactly what they look at, but Decker DeGraff was like one of the most productive tight ends last year. So if they do look at production, maybe Ploeg popped out as his junior production as well. So yeah, he's dominating terrible competition.
Yeah, I mean,
Jeremiah Scobie, Bowling Green, the next
what's his name?
Harold Fannin. Next, I don't know. I actually watched him a little. Yeah, he is another kind of like H-backy type size, like 6'3". He'll probably be like 235 or something like that. Moves pretty well. Basketball background, the whole deal. Looks pretty good. From Texas too, from a pretty big school. So I don't know. That's kind of interesting because we want to hit some of these G5 dudes that can put up big numbers like him. So maybe he's a guy to monitor.
All right, keep an eye on Jeremiah Scobie. All right, so then we're moving on to athlete here to round things out, and we got some news and notes updates. Big guy, I think that everyone's mind, Michael Terry. He comes in here producing, 27 fantasy points per game. He does it a little bit in all the ways. He's got 30 receptions 30 receiving yards per game, 93 rush yards per game. I like him better. 81 rush yards per game. I like him better as a running back myself. He's guy, we got to highlight. Anybody else again that you want to kind of call out here that is showing up for us? But these are true athletes. You can see they're producing through the air and on the ground. Isaiah Robertson is a little bit interesting.
Yeah, I actually haven't looked at Isaiah Robertson. I think Weston Bryan would probably be I watched a little bit of him because he plays for Lee County. He's the quarterback with Usman Kroma. Yeah. He actually has, I think, more rushing touchdowns than Kroma, to be honest. Like, they actually use Kroma as like a lead blocker around like inside the 10 or whatever. And he is, I don't know, he doesn't really impress me with his passing too much, but he is like a unit. He's like 6'3", 240. And he actually has some speed, honestly. He does. Like, I think I saw a post where his GPS was over 21, I think it was. And he's a big dude. So, like I mentioned, Camario Taylor being a potential, I could see him being, if he doesn't make it as, like if his passing just isn't up to snuff, I could see him being a tight end. He'd be pretty interesting in that position. But yeah, these other guys, we talked about Taylor a couple weeks ago, just producing really well. But I don't know. He just announced an offer to Utah Tech. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's going on with that, honestly.
All right, fair enough. So that takes us through all of the stats. I think that's a very fun way to look at this. Fantasy points per game, only on really the official. You're not going to see that hardly anywhere else. You're also not going to get anyone who's grinding Hawaii high school tape in real time like David. The benefit of the mountain time zone, but still, that's elite prospecting right there, I got to say. And just to round out the show, some news and notes here. We know that Kroma got a Georgia offer or a Georgia commitment. So he adds to that stable of running backs off air we were talking about. There's still going to be like 4 former 4- and 5-star running backs next year, even if ETN goes to the NFL. Don't know what to make of the depth chart. We know Matt usually is like that actually tanks guys for him in his model because of the Georgia depth chart. But we still like Kroma. We still think he's good. And Georgia, is just a tough place to blow up for fantasy purposes. Deuce Knight finally flipping from Notre Dame to Auburn. Probably more offensive potential there, would you say, David? But Auburn is also, they're not blowing the doors off this year. Maybe they need some time under Freeze.
Yeah, I think the system is generally pretty good for quarterback fantasy points, and the receivers should be in pretty good form once he's, I don't know if he's going to start right away or generally year two. So you think the receivers will be in pretty good position for him, just kind of toss it up to those guys and run a bunch. So yeah, I think the fit is definitely better there for fantasy.
Yeah, it's got to be. So we kind of like that. We also have Malik Clark, Florida State to South Carolina flip, and Joshua Moore flipping from Florida to Miami. Who can blame him? We also have some new offers. Jordan Allen out of Buford getting a Nebraska offer. Do you think Raiola pounded the table for him or something? Or they probably know him from scouting Raiola as well.
Yeah, and he just had a huge hookup this past week. Dayton Raiola. I think it was like 63 air yards or something like that. So his younger brother has a hose too. I think he might be sub 6 foot though, or he's right around 6 foot. Mm-hmm. So he's not as like physically gifted, I would say, but like he still has a hose. So I could see them, probably trying to get Jordan Allen to come to Nebraska from Louisville.
Yeah. We've got Quentin Gibson adding some offers from Colorado, Mississippi State, Pittsburgh, Kansas State, Washington State. Brendan Haygood gets a Missouri offer. Dylan Malone gets an Iowa State offer. Javian Solomon gets a Kentucky offer. LeBron Hill, Kansas State, Kansas, Georgia State, Akron, and Marshall. So he's racking up some G5 offers there. Xavier Ford gets a Houston offer. Any of these guys stand out to you as indication of like a rising prospect profile or anything like that?
I think Haygood's definitely rising. He's been really productive. I really like the way he runs. He doesn't have like an ideal size, but his like lower body strength and balance is really, really high level. He's committed to Boise State right now, and they just have so many good players. It's maybe going to Missouri might even, I don't know, it seems weird to say, but maybe there's less. Kewan Lace is pretty good too.
We like Lace, although he
yeah, so I don't know. Either way, he's probably a little bit blocked, but he's a rising player. Xavier Ford getting a Houston offer. He's in Louisiana. He's producing really well. I just know he's cousins with Michael Ford, who is a former running back from Clemson. Yeah. Doesn't nearly have his speed or anything, but he's like a 0-star guy. I'm not like high on him. I'll just say he probably deserves to be like a 3-star. But yeah, I don't know. Javon Solomon he's committed to Duke currently. Kentucky's interested in him. He does have like he looks like he's going to be a really fast player, just like his body type, like sort of a slender shoulders, like a smaller trunk but long arms. If he just like strengthens his lower body a little bit, I think it'll improve his long speed a bit. He just looks like a guy that's going to be really sudden and fast, and I could see some upside with him. Those other guys, we already we talked about Quentin Gibson. He's like a super small dude, but just producing pretty crazy in Texas right now.
Yeah, we got some interesting names to introduce. These are newly added guys to the 2025 class. They've reclassified, and interestingly enough, both South Carolina leans. So maybe South Carolina is trying to get these commitments and then get them on campus, a year early before they can switch. Donovan Murph is a lean. He's wide receiver 55 on the On3 industry ranks. And then we have Jordan Gidron, who's a wide receiver 20 on the On3 industry ranks. A pretty high get for South Carolina. Have you looked at either one of these guys? I have to confess I have not. And have any thoughts on these new classifications in the 2025 group?
I looked at it briefly. Haven't spent as much time as the other guys in this class, but Gidron looked like pretty freaky, like immediately. So I think he's 6'2", 185. I don't know if he's like, I didn't find a birthday or anything, so I don't know if if he was like held back and now he's just going into his appropriate class, or he is really young for the class. So that's the part I need to figure out. He has a really strong, both these guys actually have really strong offer lists.
Yeah, Alabama offers for both, and the other guy is Clemson as well.
Yeah, I think they might have Ohio State. I know Murph has Ohio State. Gidron might too. I'm not sure, but so they're interesting. South Carolina, clearly they could use some receivers.
Yeah.
So Gidron, I could see Gidron playing as a freshman, and Murph, it's kind of it's up. I think he's leaning South Carolina. I think I prefer Gidron of the two. You can see that with the On3 industry rankings, basically. So Gidron's pretty interesting.
600 meter, I think. So I mean, he's definitely got some long speed.
Yeah, I think Gidron looks pretty good in the athletic pro. He'll be pretty high. I feel like when all is said and done, he'll probably be like 80th percentile or something like that. So he's interesting. I got to watch tape on him.
Yeah. All right. Well, that about does it. You just got a complete data dump of everything going on the high school recruiting C2C prospect landscape. Like and subscribe to this video if you enjoy the content, if you like what we do here on The Official. For David, I am Alfred, and we'll see Matt back here next week. Take it easy.